Megaprojects are something to truly be proud of once they're completed, but there are some projects that end up completely abandoned. This could be due to financing, force, or the fact that it was never a good idea in the first place. From the lawless walled city, where residents stacked their apartments themselves 14 stories into the air, to the sabotage of the never-used Nord Stream 2 pipeline. On this episode of Built a Billion, we present to you some of the world's biggest abandoned projects ever, and stay till the end to see the largest skyscraper ever abandoned. Titanic 2. There's no ship more famous than the Titanic that tragically sank on April 15, 1912, killing 1,496 people. But strangely, so many people have romanticized the ship, and there have been several attempts to rebuild the iconic ocean vessel. The most notable being Australian Clive Palmer. The eccentric billionaire announced the Titanic 2 in a press conference, and by 2013, information was being released on the details of how everything would come together. The design of the megaship would stay largely the same, with the exception of the addition of a safety deck, complete with modern lifeboats and new common areas for passengers. According to preliminary schematics, more differences would include private bathrooms for each cabin and AC for the whole ship. But amenities like the indoor swimming pool, squash court, grand staircases, lounges, dining rooms, and outdoor deck spaces would all be painstakingly recreated. This would facilitate an authentic museum-like experience for passengers on the open ocean. The ship would be a blast from the past, but still include diesel engines, battle thrusters, and azipod thrusters. The ship would sail under Clive's new company, Blue Star Line, and it all seemed promising. When the issue of safety came up, Blue Star Line had the answer for that too. The ship was being built from the ground up, with our modern regulations, meaning navigation wouldn't be an issue. Also, the structure of the Titanic 2 would be welded together, which would not allow its hull to share the same fate as its predecessor. The total price for this mega project? $400 to $600 million. Titanic 2 was set to take off around the world in 2016. Design was underway by September of 2013, but then the funding didn't materialize as fast as they hoped, pushing the sale date to 2018. In 2015, after pay disputes and government funding being denied, the project went dead again. Then in 2018, the project sprang to life once more with a random promo video being released on Clive Palmer's political YouTube channel. Deals were signed and a new completion date was set for 2022. Finally, everything would go smoothly, except it wouldn't. In 2020, Palmer was accused of fraud in his mining business and suffered a pretty serious medical hiccup as well. As of today, the Titanic 2 project sits abandoned, an embarrassment to everyone involved, unless Palmer pays the $400 million himself. Biosphere 2. The Biosphere 2 was supposed to be an experiment in what life would be like on another planet. It was tasked with creating a closed Earth system that could test the validity of human life on a non-Earth planet, all within an impressive structure. The idea came from businessman Ed Bass, who invested $150 million of his own money in 1984 to get the ball rolling. Construction was completed between 1987 and 1991 by Space Biosphere Ventures, making it the largest biosphere project in the world. The project consisted of biodomes constructed of steel tubing and high-performance glass. There were 7 biodomes in total, including a rainforest, ocean, mangrove wetlands, savanna grasslands, fog desert, agricultural system, and human workspace system with living spaces and labs. The glass panels that cover most of the domes used solar power to generate the biome's electricity, and there was also a large natural gas center on site. The biosphere covered 40 acres in total, with the domes reaching heights of 27.7 meters or 91 feet. But the Biosphere 2 was famous for its mistakes, which led to its abandonment. So let's get into that, shall we? In 1991, 8 people entered the Biosphere and wouldn't leave for 2 years and 20 minutes. Why the 20 minutes? Absolutely no clue. Along with them went 3,000 plants and animal species. Apart from that, despite reports of the volunteers being hungry all the time, studies showed that the humans' health had improved, and that the crops were being produced faster than anywhere else in the world. But it proved very hard to actually replicate Earth accurately in the domes. Pollinating insects were wiped out, and trees suffered from etiolation, which is weaker stems and leaves as a result of low light. Each person was allocated a pound of meat per week, and coffee was a once-a-week treat. That alone is enough to abandon this project. This leads to the biome's biggest problem: the humans. Halfway through the experiment, the group had split into two factions over whether research should take precedence over the closed system process. Basically, one group wanted to order a pizza, while the other group felt that that would compromise the experiment. Which faction would you belong to? Let me know in the comments. Also, oxygen levels fell about 15% in 16 months, most likely due to microbes in the soil producing carbon dioxide. This forced oxygen to be pumped into the biome in 1993, but still no pizzas. By the end of 1993, over 1 million people had visited the biomes to learn about biodiversity, and the mission was over. But the second mission that started in 1994 was a complete disaster. 7 humans entered for a 10-month program, but 1 month in, the on-site manager was fired and replaced by none other than Steve Bannon. Yes, that's Steve Bannon. Before you know it, 2 members of the prior study entered the Biosphere, smashed some windows, and opened one of the doors to the airlocks. Apparently, the first mission made them absolutely nuts. In June of 1994, Space Biosphere Ventures was dissolved, and the whole project descended into oblivion by later that year. The Biosphere 2 project was abandoned, but the biomes are still used today by Arizona University for studying things that don't require locking humans inside. But the next project on our list was a city that didn't have a problem packing humans inside, as it was the most densely populated region on Earth at one time, and no country could govern it. But before we get into that, if you're enjoying this content and love to hear about all the megaprojects of the world, please subscribe to the channel and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. It'll really help the channel out. Now back to the video. Kowloon Walled City. There was once a city eternally shrouded in darkness that was the most densely populated place on Earth. Sunlight never penetrated its walled city that was filled with 33,000 people crammed into self-built apartments with barely 10 meters of space. This place was known as Kowloon Walled City, and it was located on the edge of Hong Kong. It was inhabited by the poor in an attempt to rebuild their lives, but ended up being an abandoned and bizarre megaproject. But how did it come to be, and why? In 1839, the Qing dynasty of China and the British Empire engaged in the First Opium War, which didn't go well for China at all. And it wasn't long before Hong Kong and the territory that held Kowloon, an old Song dynasty fort, belonged to the British. In 1948, there was a bloody civil war going on in China between communists and nationalists, and people were dying by the boatload. So thousands fled to Hong Kong to seek refuge, with most ending up in Kowloon. 2,000 refugees were squatting there, and colonial police went to remove them. They instead were attacked by 2,000 refugees throwing rocks, and needless to say, the police just let them have the fort. By 1950, the population of the fort hit 17,000 people, and these people included criminals, anarchists, dropouts, and fugitives, all coinciding together in what was now Kowloon Walled City. The same year, a fire burned through the makeshift town, with only the ancient core from the Song dynasty surviving, but the inhabitants rebuilt it. They constructed new homes on top of each other that grew according to the citizens' needs. By 1962, Britain wanted to get rid of the city, but Beijing said they had no right due to a treaty that the British signed decades ago. The British said okay, but forbid Beijing to administer the city either, and so Kowloon Walled City became one of the strangest cities in human history. As the population continued to grow, the people had only the option to build vertically, as the British was most definitely not about to let them have any more real estate. By the 1980s, the walled city had hit 14 stories, with 10 to 30 square meter apartments balanced precariously on top of one another. These apartments were mostly the size of a bedroom and often housed 3 to 4 generations of people within them, and everyone set up shop with unlicensed businesses, including dentistry, slaughterhouses, and factories. but the city was kind of famous for its food. Hong Kong residents would actually go to Kowloon Walled City for its noodles, and 80% of all rice bowls in Hong Kong was prepared in the dingy dark city. And in this city, it was the triads who enforced order among the chaos. They organized waste collection, gave the elderly a pension, and made a volunteer fire department. And there was a lot of heroin and opium. There were schools though, libraries, and even temples in the city. But in 1987, the British came back to get rid of the place. And this time, Beijing wasn't going to intervene. They were happy. They were getting Hong Kong back anyway. By 1991, 96% of the residents and 51% of the businesses had agreed to leave with compensation packages. The colonial authorities vacated the last of the stragglers in the city, and demolition of the city began in 1993. By April of 1994, the walled city was completely destroyed, and the architecture designed by the people was no more. Nord Stream 2. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline was a pipeline completed in 2021 that was supposed to deliver natural gas from Russia to Europe via Germany. It runs parallel to the original Nord Stream line, stretches 1,230 kilometers, and costed $11 billion. It's formed from 100,000 24-ton pieces, and it's a twin line, which means there's actually 2 lines of pipes. If operational, it would send 55 cubic meters of gas per year, enough for 26 million homes. Construction started in 2018 with sections being welded on board a ship before being added to the main pipe and then lowered to the seabed. On Germany's end, 2,700 meters of microtunnels were constructed, connecting the receiving station to the pipeline as it nears the shore. This required a tunnel boring machine that dug a pathway to the water, laying pipe as it went. But now we get into the controversy. The Nord Stream 2 is way shorter than its predecessor that flows through Ukraine. The Nord Stream 2 takes a shortcut to Germany, but skips over Ukraine in the process. Ukraine relies heavily on the current pipelines for income and stands to lose out on the new plan. Not only this, but the pipeline has created reasonable fears that Russia could gain too much power and possibly control Europe's energy system. They already export over a third of Europe's gas. The pipeline would see Russia's gas exports double, in theory making the Nord Stream 2 its geopolitical weapon. In February of 2022, Germany suspended its certification process of the pipeline altogether in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Then, in September of that year, both the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines were blown up. No one officially knows who did it, but America blames Russia, which doesn't make much sense, so everyone else is looking at America with a lot of suspicion. With a lot of countries that could have had a motive, we have found ourselves in a classic whodunit, and I myself will say it had to be the butler. Regardless of who did what, the Nord Stream 2 was a marvelous feat of engineering that never even got turned on before it was sabotaged, making it one of the world's most infamous abandoned megaprojects. Golden Finance. At 600 meters, the Golden Finance 117 in China holds the record for the world's tallest unoccupied building. Before being abandoned, this project was slated to be the 6th tallest building in the world. Plans were first conceived in the early 2000s by billionaire Pat Sutong, chairman of investment company Golden Financial Holdings. The building was to be the centerpiece of Golden Metropolitan, a 1.8 square kilometer luxury residential and business district located outside of downtown Zhangjin. The skyscraper would include 128 floors, with 117 floors for commercial and housing space. The other 11 are for mechanical and operational systems, and there would be a diamond-shaped roof at 3 stories high. It would hold the world's highest swimming pool, observation deck, and restaurant at 580 meters above the ground. Construction began in 2008 and was supposed to be finished in 2014. But in 2010, Golden had to cut its costs during the global financial crisis, and construction was paused. It resumed again in 2011, and the skyscraper would now open in 2015. In 2015, the structure was completed, but the Chinese economy itself bottomed out, causing Golden stock to plummet 67%, and Sutong himself lost $13 billion. Golden then suspended all work on the project indefinitely. However, the skyscraper may have been destined to fail from the beginning, because the building was created as a luxury for the rich elite. Even if the construction of the building had went smoothly, the target audience for it didn't exist. No one in the city could afford it, and who knew if the wealthy Chinese would move to Jiangxin to live in a skyscraper? The contractor has completely abandoned the construction site and taken all the equipment and workers with him. The Golden Finance 117 now towers over Jiangxin and remains a useless wonder that has never been occupied. Which one of these was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And click that video on the screen to watch a video on more abandoned megaprojects. Thanks for visiting Built